All right. Welcome, everybody. Bitcoin Bullets Monday night, special Monday night tonight. We've got a very special guest on the call. Very excited to have him on. And I reached out to Jesse a couple weeks back, and without hesitation, didn't even really know. Well, doesn't know who I am or anything, and just agreed to come on the call. And so it amazes me that or at how generous the Bitcoin community really is. And Jesse's a testament to that. I've seen him on a number of other calls and is always willing to, take the time out of his busy schedule to come on and do stuff like this. So really appreciate you coming on the call, Jesse. Are you there, bud? Oh, let me make you I'm going to make you a co-host here. There we go.
There we go. Thank you for the very kind introduction. Yeah, great to be here.
The beard's gotten a little longer than I saw you on the last one.
It's sort of, it's a little bit of a lockdown protest beard kind of thing.
Hey, we all have to protest in our own way. So I can dig it. So, hey, thanks for coming on, Jesse. A fellow Torontonian. Well, I've just recently moved out of the city, just west of the city, but very cool to have, a fellow Canadian and be such a prominent one in the space as well. So really excited to have you on. Why don't we just kick things off with a little bit about your background and how you got into Bitcoin?
Yeah, sure thing. For me, it started with money even before Bitcoin. I studied, economics and philosophy when I was an undergrad, and began my career working sort of at the bottom rung of the corporate retail banking ladder. I was working at RBC, and that started in 2006 for me, right as the financial crisis was getting warmed up. And I like vividly remember when the Fed came out and said, "Oh, the banks are too big to fail. We're going to do these bailouts. We're going to print $600 billion to save the banks." And I remember sitting there going like, I don't remember learning that this was part of the process, when I was studying economics in undergrad. And that got me thinking, right as my career was getting underway, just starting to ask questions and really, challenge the dominant narrative of like, what is money? How do economics really work? A buddy of mine who, he worked down the street from me in marketing while I was in banking. We would go for lunch every once in a while. He goes, "Oh, have you seen this Peter Schiff was right video?" And I it's annoying that I bring up Peter Schiff a bunch on my interviews. But for those that don't know, in 2006 or in 2007, I guess I should say, someone cut up a bunch of clips of Peter Schiff on CNBC and Fox Business and, all these news channels. And it was just him like accurately predicting everything that unfolded in the global financial crisis. And I saw this and I go, I didn't know someone knew this was coming or knew how it would happen because everyone seemed so surprised. And so I started following him and learning about economics through him. And as I developed my own knowledge and understanding, that actually ended up being the thing that led me to my next job. So I wound up meeting an investment advisor, portfolio manager, and we saw very much eye to eye, sort of had similar ideologies. And so basically he hired me. I remember vividly going to lunch with him one day and he brought his assistant and he's like, "Yeah, he basically turned the lunch into an interview." And, he calls me later. He's like, "Yeah, so we're talking to a few other people and, we'll let you know." And I remember leaving the lunch going like, he's got nobody else. Like he has nobody else. And sure enough, he hired me on and I ended up working with him for 3 years. And I was a gold bug back then because I was asking again, what is money? That's like the big driving question for me. What is money? And so at the time, gold was the best money that the world had known. And so I bought gold. I bought gold miners because I was working with a broker who was more familiar with the mining side of the business. We were buying mining stocks and that kind of thing. And I did that for a few years, but ultimately I realized that I didn't want to manage people's money for a living because I realized that as much as they love you, when you do well for your clients, they hate you more than they ever loved you when you lose money. And working with a broker where we were buying gold and these junior mining stocks, we were in a very volatile, we ran more volatile portfolios than the average. So decided to leave that field, or leave that job and leave that, career path. Didn't know what I wanted to do. Ended up going back to do my MBA. And the purpose of that for me was just sort of explore, other industries, meet people in different fields, open doors, find new opportunities. And, despite my efforts, I wound up back in financial services, doing management consulting and financial services. And I did that for a few months. I worked basically for 6 months on like a really large project, which was like a back end project for RBC, evaluating commercial borrowers, specifically defaulted commercial borrowers, which was very tedious and very annoying, to just look at people that went bankrupt all day, or companies, I should say, that went bankrupt all day. But from there, I managed to jump ship to a market research and customer experience consultancy called Verde Group. And they're a small group company that most people would not have heard of, but we worked with very, very large companies. And my client who I worked with for 2 years while I was there was Sun Life. I managed their whole market research program in Canada, the US, and Asia. And so I got to learn, basically how these market research surveys work, the objectives, how, the data analysis, all the stuff that goes on in the back end, what they use the data for. It was an interesting couple of years and I had a great tenure there, but basically while I was there, I began investing in Bitcoin and other things. I won't list the coins, but I sort of got dragged into the cryptoverse, cryptosphere right at the beginning of 2017, and sort of, there's a whole backstory to what got me in there. I had, my timing was just more lucky than good, but made a few bucks and thought, you know what? As I got into it, started actually experiencing for myself what Bitcoin is, transferring it, like how it works, why it works, really digging into the technology and the purpose of it. It jogged all those roots I had from 2007 when I was like red pilled on what is money. And so all those things started coming back to me and they started gelling with Bitcoin and what Bitcoin is. And I just knew that, yes, this was sort of my calling and I had to contribute here some way, somehow. And yeah, here I am today. So I've been sort of on my own for, I guess it's about 2 years now, just trying to find my way in Bitcoin. I didn't set out to write a book, but it just kind of happened. Bitcoin sort of compels people to do these things, to contribute, like you were saying in the introduction. And yeah, so happy to talk to you all things Bitcoin, the book, whatever.
Love to talk a little, well, do both. Why don't we dive into the book though a little bit? Now, this strikes me as a major labor of love. This is not a book that, for those of you, like, there are some people that are on this call that will have the book. It's phenomenal. I'm gonna, I've been peppering, my group here. I've been badgering them to get this book because I think it's sensational. And but what really struck me about it was, well, a few things, but one was this isn't just like, and I want to sort of get a little bit of backstory as to, why you decided to choose the format that you did. But even in this sort of, bite-sized format, this is not a book that you could just, parse, Twitter accounts or newsletters and just slap it together. I mean, that you've got quotes from all walks of life. Right down to like very specific details. There was a tremendous amount of work that was put into this. So first of all, kudos. I think it's a major accomplishment. But yeah, tell us a little bit about why you decided to do it in sort of this like, bullet form, which just, for me, it just makes it so digestible, the info. But just give us a little sort of thought process on that.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you very much. It was very much a labor of love. And I was actually on a podcast called Love and Dividends a couple weeks ago, and it's run by my friend Leslie. And when she brought me on the podcast, I was like, am I going to talk about love? Like, how am I going to talk about love when we're talking about Bitcoin? And she starts off in her intro and she goes, so Jesse, this book, like, she loved it too. And she was like, so you basically wrote a love letter to Bitcoin. And I was like, first of all, thank you for making the job easy, because now, okay, I understand how we're going to talk about love. And B, I never thought of it that way, but yes, you're absolutely right. That's what it was. So how this came to be was, like I said, I had sort of left my job. I knew I just had to find my way in the world of Bitcoin, because I knew what a sort of powerful force it was. I had this, deep-seated understanding that went back a decade of, money is a tool for social engineering. And if we have better money, we can have better social outcomes. And if we have crappy money, we're going to have crappy outcomes. And I think we're really seeing the crappy side today. But so I was sort of on my own. I thought, okay, you know what? I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I'm going to start putting together this PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to maybe, pitch it to high net worth investors or anyone, and, help them understand Bitcoin, because I knew it was such a potent and profound, like a really important development for the world. And so I'll try to really help them wrap their head around it. I'll put together this pitch deck. I don't even know what it was. It was just a PowerPoint deck. To sort of help them understand the different components, because there's so many moving parts. There's so many pieces to Bitcoin. It's hard for people to really grasp it all, and no one can really grasp it all, but you build it. It's something that goes in layers. And so you can sort of build up your knowledge of it. And within, a few weeks, I had this PowerPoint that was 80 slides, and I showed it to a friend of mine. He's like, dude, you can't actually present this to anyone. This thing is enormous. And it was all words. It was like just all words. I had a quote at the top of every slide to try to, soften the introduction to every idea on every slide. But basically, when you give a PowerPoint presentation, for the most part, every slide you're presenting an idea, more or less, or you're presenting, a few points that sort of work together on that slide. And so my friend said to me, he's like, this is a terrible PowerPoint, because you can't present this to anyone. It's going to take you 5 hours, but this is a great skeleton for a book. You should consider turning this into a book. And I was like, oh, I never thought of that. I can't do that. I wouldn't know how to be an author or how to write this. And I thought he was crazy. I went to sleep that night, and I woke up the next morning, and it was just like, oh yeah, of course. Like, how else could I take all this and sort of convey it and give it out to people, or let people access what I put together. And so the book as it stands today, I would say I had, 70 or 80% of the sort of framework is identical to that initial PowerPoint that I had, in terms of the layout of the different chapters and some of the subtopics within each of the chapters. And I just went through this process of adapting it into a book. And once I really committed to making it a book, it was just like off to the races for me. I thought of nothing for a year, because, like, very much like you said, it really was a labor of love. I just got so into it. And as you know, because Mike, now you've read it, I was very, very adamant that I wanted every page to be really like friendly and easy to read and approachable, so that, because Bitcoin can be a complex and intimidating topic. And so I didn't want the book to seem intimidating or complex in any way. And so I wanted to write in a language that was relatable and friendly, but I still had to convey these very complex ideas. And that was where I labored, was translating the really complex, nuanced ideas of Bitcoin into this more friendly and approachable language. And as I went through the process, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I rewrote pages or rewrote entire chapters. I rewrote the chapter on scarcity, I think 3 times. Like the whole chapter, I rewrote it several times. And, as I got closer to the end, I ended up, so I have full page images in the book as well, because it's just, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I just thought that, man, wouldn't that be like a nice, friendly way to sort of break up the book? I've sort of skipped a little bit of one piece, but I had the PowerPoint. And what I did was I took that same principle of one idea, one slide, and I applied that to the book, where every page is one siloed, just like encapsulated idea, and you are building up one idea in one page, one on top of the other on top of the other, and you're trying to build up that knowledge. And if at any point you want to go back and reference an idea because you're up here now, but it's dependent on an idea that you read earlier, because every page is its own little idea, and it has its own title, like every page is literally individually titled, it's very easy to go back and find an idea that I discussed previously so that you can refresh yourself, and then, okay, you can continue moving forward.
Well, I mean, it's kind of what I really dig about it, because, you know, as people do, they'll pick up a book and they'll sort of like skim to somewhere in the middle, and they'll just take a gander, right? And all of a sudden, like, people that have grabbed the book and flipped somewhere to the middle, and immediately they're drawn in because they're like, okay, I've got the time or whatever, I can wrap my head around these couple paragraphs with this concept. And, you know, they read the quote, it's maybe someone that they, anyways, these are all standalone ideas. And I found that just someone flipping to any part of the book will get a taste for your style, obviously what you're trying to convey, info wise, and immediately be drawn in and be like, and you can just tell they want to start to read more, or it's going to compel them to go and start from the beginning and then go through. But I just love the fact that you literally could pick up the book, open to any page, and get a full dose of a concept that might, like you said, otherwise be somewhat difficult to wrap your head around. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, every page, for the most part, every page you could read as a standalone, and it would make sense. I mean, obviously, I'm building some ideas on top of others, and some of them relate. But for the most part, yeah, it's very easy to just dive back in, pick any random page, and you could digest one single idea, and it should make sense. And also, I wanted to have this sort of bravado, this storytelling component where it had this sort of whimsical thing too. So it was a lot of things flowing in my head all at once, and trying to get it into the book to be, fundamentally and technically sound, but also have this really, have a very definitive style and personality to it. So a lot of work went into it, and it's not a very long book, right? It's, there's in terms of text, there's 110-ish pages, and then there's another 15 pages of graphs and images. So it's a relatively short book, but you get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of, like, I do not waste a single word in that book. There is zero fluff. It gets right to someone told me as I was writing, they're like, curious people just want to get to the point. And I thought, you know what? Yeah, like I was already sort of down that track in my writing, but that line of curious people want to get to the point, that resonated with me. And that's something that I believe, makes sense for this book, or that applies to this book.
I think it's synthesized so well, and it's, for people's attention spans these days, which are, minuscule, including mine. I mean, I just found it so easy to flip from one to another. So yeah, major accomplishment. Now, was this something that, I mean, you said you had, the 80 slides or what have you. Now, then did this just pour out, or did it take you, were there some grueling parts of that journey? Did it take you longer than you thought it would have, or?
It's funny, like some of the parts that I thought would come easier to me, for instance, chapter 3 is on money. And I thought, oh, well, I worked in banking and I really was into Austrian economics. Like, this is going to be a breeze for me. And no, that wasn't the case. Some of the ones that I thought should be really hard actually flowed out pretty seamlessly, like the chapter on freedom and governance, or the 2 chapters on freedom and governance. Those were subjects that, I had thought about, but not necessarily really drilled into, especially in this sort of this exercise. And, how do I put all these thoughts that I have in my head? How do I get them onto paper? I thought those would take me a really long time. And I managed to, I think, get through those pretty seamlessly and quickly. And I remember when I finished one, I wrote the book in sequence. I didn't like skip ahead and write anything. It was all written in sequence. And so when I wrote it and I would look back and I go, wow, like, yeah, I couldn't believe that I finished it. And that it actually seems pretty good. Like, I'm pretty happy with this. Okay, I'll move on to the next one. And I wrote that. Oh, it's pretty good. All right. Oddly enough, the last chapter, which is a relatively short chapter, I labored tremendously on those last few pages. But because I knew I had to get it right. Like, you've read the end of the book now, so there's something very special to the end. I think, to the last few pages and the last chapter. And I really, really, really want to get it right, because I wanted, like, the whole book is meant to be a very positive and uplifting reading experience, and then you have to go out with a bang. Like, there sort of has to be this grand finale, and it's almost like a movie in that sense, right? So I had an idea for it, but I didn't quite know how to do it. That one I labored with. So yeah, it was at times arduous, at times seamless. There were sections that I rewrote over and over and over and over again, because I either had too much information, or I was just being too wordy and lengthy, or just the ideas were muddied and I had to figure out how to fit the pieces together properly. It was a lot. It was like a puzzle, in terms of like really fidgeting and moving things around and fitting it together just in just the right way, that everything would work well together and resonate.
So cool. Does this make you want to write another one?
Well, there won't be a part two, I'll say, to this book. I'll put it that way. This book was very much written to be like a timeless book. I hope it stands the test of time. That was part of my goal. In terms of writing another book, it's not on my radar right now. I have written. I don't know if you read that Risk It for the Brisket blog I put out a couple weeks ago. It's not about Bitcoin. It was about basically our rights in Canada. So totally different subject matter. But yeah, I've been, I think I will continue writing. Whether or not I write another book about Bitcoin remains to be seen. I have my doubts about that. I have other ideas though for writing in Bitcoin and contributing to Bitcoin with it. But yeah, like a book like this, I don't know how I could possibly do another book like that.
I hear you. That's great.
Yeah.
So let's dive into a little bit of Bitcoin stuff. A question we'll just kind of do a little bit of a broad stroke more with the economic landscape. So my brother wanted me to ask this question, which was, how do you feel about the current economic situation in Canada? And do you have a sense for what the coming years might look like?
Yes. And I almost don't want to talk about it, because I think it's going to be pretty ugly. Just generally speaking, right now, I gotta think about how do I even phrase this? Generally speaking, we're not doing economics correctly, I guess, is a really simple sort of statement. And this is obviously a very broad question. But for me, obviously money is a big issue, right? Like, money is the grease. It greases all the wheels. Every single transaction in society is it's based on money. Everything happens via the exchange of money. And if you control money, he who controls money can print more of it, determines the interest rates, all that stuff. Banks can give out loans. They have more power than people who don't have that ability. That is unjust, it is unfair. It leads to greater disparity in wealth distribution and income distribution. And so, I mean, this is not a problem that's isolated to Canada, obviously, and Bitcoin was meant to be a solution for everyone, everywhere. But in terms of like what we're doing specifically, I mean, Canada has we have socialized healthcare, we have socialized education, and we're seeing a little bit of what happens in socialized systems. There's a saying that goes, socialism is a great system until you run out of other people's money to spend. And it feels like we're kind of hitting a little bit of a tipping point with that right now in Canada. I'm very concerned about what the consequences of all this will be, because we're running up debts like crazy, right? They're printing and spending money like crazy, and who's going to pay for that, right? The poor will be given, whether it's universal basic income, which is a bad idea for a lot of reasons, but whether it's CERB, you're discouraging productivity, you're discouraging work. That's the thing that enriches people's lives. That's how we create value for one another, is when people have incentive to compete and be productive and be energized. And it is a like virtuous circle of fueling people for good intentions and providing value to one another. And when we disincentivize that, what'll happen, or what I think will happen to a certain degree, like I said, unfortunately, the poor get hit the hardest. The middle class foots the bill for it because they're the ones who are going to pay higher taxes, while the upper class will get away with it to one degree or another, whether through, they have better tax evasion schemes. And I shouldn't say schemes, it's just using the tax system as it's laid out, because we have a very, very, very complicated tax system here in Canada that deserves to be radically simplified. But the wealthy, they have assets, they have means, they'll be okay. And if especially in Canada, because so many industries are in bed with the government, you can sort of curry favor, and they'll effectively be less affected. The middle class will end up getting pushed down. We're just going to create more and more wealth disparity and income disparity in this country. So that was a little bit of a wishy-washy answer, but I think we're just not heading in the right direction, generally speaking.
And so obviously you feel like Bitcoin is an answer for many that feel like, they're stuck, or the outlook doesn't favor them, right?
Yeah, well, Bitcoin levels the playing field, right? It doesn't matter how much Bitcoin you have. The point is that it's yours and you can do anything you want with it. If the government's talking, or there's rumblings, I should say, about wealth taxes and things like that, Bitcoin is something that they can't touch. If you want to leave the country with your money, how are they going to know you have it? It's an escape hatch, and it's a savings account. This is another sort of thing I've been talking a little bit about lately in different interviews and conversations I've had. Bitcoin is sort of like your piggy bank. Like you put your coins in, if you're working, it doesn't matter how much, what your income is, how much savings you have. But if you're just contributing little by little, adding your Bitcoin, whatever accumulates in that piggy bank, it's yours. It's there. It's unconfiscatable. It's uninflatable. It's unalienable. No one can take it from you. Like, it's a very, very powerful tool. Money in the bank. And when I say money in the bank, I should say dollars in the bank. Those are, your bank's liability. They owe you those dollars. Maybe they'll come up with some reason to take a part of it. And I'm thinking very radically right now because we're in crazy times, and I'm forced to really think that way and be that way. But it's something that everyone, I think, really needs to consider. And for whatever you have, like having something that is not subject to government overreach is a very powerful thing, and will be very powerful in the future, I believe.
Do you think there is a correlation between people's level of understanding of Bitcoin and even more broadly money in general, and their desire to get into it, or the amount that they own?
Yeah, it seems to be the case, especially once you get to know a lot of Bitcoiners, that the more you understand Bitcoin and the more comfortable you get with it. This is actually a good time for me to sort of suggest that Bitcoin is something that you understand in layers, and you get to know it in layers. There may be the aha moment where Bitcoin makes sense, but then actually using it and finding its power is something that you go through in layers. Sorry, I distracted myself with that tangent. Remind me the original question. Sorry, remind me the original question.
Just the correlation between people's knowledge of Bitcoin and how much they might own.
Yeah. So basically, as you get more and more familiar with it, and it seems to just resonate that much more with you, and it makes more sense than anything else out there. And so you just want to own more of it than you do anything else. Like, I used to be a stockbroker or junior, associate stockbroker. I used to sell mutual funds. Like, I don't see any asset out there that has any appeal to me anymore. Like, the only thing I buy with extra cash is Bitcoin. Stocks are a casino to me. All I see are just numbers going up and down that, maybe some new product for some other company is going to outcompete it, the earnings, this and that. You're trying to predict all this stuff. It's very complicated, and that market is changing. Bitcoin is just very simple and profound. It's just I'm saving money. Making dollars, you can't really save dollars because in the future their purchasing power is guaranteed to go down. We know dollars are going to lose value over time. So I can't really save money in that sense using dollars. And that's one of the fundamental purposes of money is you want to be able to save it because you earn this value and then you want to be able to use it in the future when you're ready. But if it depreciates on you while it's sitting in the savings, it's not doing its job. And so Bitcoin gives that other option. And it's just simple in the sense that I know there's only 21 million coins out there. So I can measure my savings as X divided by 21 million. And whatever my number is, I own 1 Bitcoin, I own 5 Bitcoins, I have 0.1 Bitcoins. It doesn't matter. It's X divided by 21 million. And that's how I think of my savings and my money. My share of savings in the world is always going to be unchanged. And that's like a very powerful thing when you think about it, because dollars, if I have $10,000, $100,000, $1 million, out of what? How many dollars are out there today? How many are going to be out there tomorrow? It's this wobbly scale for measuring value and saving, and it seems pointless the more I get to know it and understand it. Part of understanding Bitcoin is also understanding the fiat monetary system. Like that's a big component of it, I think, because when you understand the flaws of fiat, the benefits of Bitcoin become that much more apparent. So there's two parts to it. You need to understand both Bitcoin and fiat for Bitcoin to make sense.
So that being said, what do you think, or like what characteristic or element of Bitcoin do you think is the most overlooked or misunderstood?
Probably the difficulty adjustment is the most misunderstood part of Bitcoin. I'll explain what that is. So everyone sort of knows there's 21 million Bitcoin. That's well understood. We, for the most part, understand that they are issued on a predetermined schedule. So as of right now, there's 18.7 or so million Bitcoin in circulation out of the 21 million over the next bunch of years, up until the year 2140, give or take. Those remaining 2.3 million coins will be mined. So we know the schedule. We know when those new coins will come into circulation. So that's the supply side of things. The supply side is totally and permanently known. Demand is the only variable in Bitcoin, right? At any given time, and demand, when I say demand, I'm not referring to how many dollars are chasing Bitcoin. I mean, that's part of it from the market value thing side of it. But in terms of mining and bringing new coins into circulation and securing the network, demand is, the computer processing power, right? That's what fuels the network and secures the network. So demand changes. More miners come online, miners go offline. As that happens, Bitcoin has a built-in mechanism called the difficulty adjustment, which self-adjusts. So it's not that whatever point we're at in the predetermined schedule, it requires, X amount of work or X amount of demand to get those coins. It's the schedule is set, and whatever demand exists at the time, it will be more or less difficult depending on if there's more or less demand for those coins. So as more and more miners come online, mining gets harder and harder and harder. If miners were to drop offline, mining would get easier and easier and easier. It's a very nuanced part of Bitcoin, but it's also a very profound thing because it's sort of a way for Bitcoin to be its own free market for determining its price as money. And when I say its price, I'm not referring to dollars, but I mean, computer processing power or energy. So I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. And like you said, there's a ton of layers. I don't know if anyone understands, Bitcoin perfectly, but it's like we're all on this sort of journey and doing our part to try and point people in the right direction, and just so that they can, we can orange pill as many people as we can.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most frustrating part of this journey for you being in Bitcoin?
So I'm not, the most tech savvy person. I've had to learn as I go. And so it's hard to help people, you know, take, you know what, I'm not even going to go into the technology part. It's hard. I'll stick with a more personal thing and a people thing. It's difficult to get people to wrap their head around the idea and really embrace the idea that you can be personally responsible for your money, that you do not have to rely on a bank who, at some point may say, okay, we're cutting you off. There was fraudulent activity on your banking card. Oh, you sent Jesse some cash. Well, Jesse's a Bitcoiner and we don't like Bitcoiners, so we're going to freeze your account while we investigate. Like, that's a risk that we don't take into account. And the risk is trusting someone else. So embracing, the do-it-yourself attitude that, like, I am personally responsible for my wealth and my future and my well-being. And it's much more than managing your money. It's very much a reminder. And it's, a lot of people talk about the philosophy and the almost spiritual sort of element of Bitcoin, which sounds crazy to say out loud, but it's kind of true, that by embracing that, you're recognizing, you're willing to make a change to yourself, and you're willing to approach life a little bit differently. And that ends up echoing in a lot of different facets of life. I've found, and many Bitcoiners have found. So, getting people to change that mindset of, well, someone else is going to take care of it for me, versus, no, I can do this myself. It is very empowering. It is very self-empowering that way. So that's a really difficult thing to do, especially to people who, again, we're so used to just the existing legacy monetary system. It's just always been there. We grew up with it. It was simple and straightforward. Not simple and straightforward, but we knew how to use it. We were taught to use it. It's comfortable. And Bitcoin is a little uncomfortable in the way that, you have to do it yourself. So that's what I would say.
It's great. And one of my next questions was going to be, how, deeply have you been affected by Bitcoin? And you probably answered a little bit of it there. I think it sounds like you touched on it, but if you want to expand on that, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. I can expand a little bit. Basically, the mantra, don't trust, verify. That's sort of a Bitcoin proverb, right? Don't trust, verify. And we apply that to money. And so when you run your own node, you're responsible for your own money, you're responsible for your own Bitcoin, you're not trusting the bank, you're verifying for yourself. That is something that you can apply in a lot of other elements of life. Reading the news, thinking critically about what you're told versus what, you're seeing happen in the world. And then, figuring out yourself how you reconcile those is something that you learn that, okay, I can't rely on someone else to tell me. I have to figure it out for myself. I have to be critical there. I see Mariana said absolutely yes. That's one of the effects, I think, that Bitcoin ends up having. But it's, again, I like to quote, a lot of other Bitcoiners, and I can't always attribute it properly, but to get into Bitcoin, you sort of have to go on your own hero's journey. Everyone becomes their own hero, because you're figuring it out for yourself. You're putting on the cape, you're going to go and soar and fly on your own, and no one's there to catch you, and it's all on you. And that's okay. And it's okay to fail too, doing it, but, like, so long as you learn and you grow from it. So, don't trust, verify, do it for yourself, like, and extrapolate that to other elements of your life. It's very empowering.
And I mean, I don't know about you, but Bitcoin has turned me into much more of a saver mindset. You hear about the 2 pizzas for $10,000 purchase, right? And I tell that story often, and it's like, that's why we're not spending our Bitcoin, right? And so I think, just in general, the ripple effects of that have, a lot of people that are in my network have started to think that way, which is like, what the opportunity cost of buying something now versus waiting, maybe a few years, could be a huge difference, right? And that's starting to play on a lot of people's minds. I think it's just from a personal financial standpoint, like you said, be your own bank. That's
Yeah.
huge. That's huge and profound effects, I feel.
Yeah, fiat money fosters a very myopic mindset of like you can only see 2 inches in front of your face. It's just I need this right here, right now. You're willing to go into debt. You're when you go into debt, you're pulling your savings from your future forward. You're saying, I'm going to spend the savings that I haven't saved yet. I'm going to take those from the future and I'm going to spend it now and I'm going to pay it back later. So you condemn your future self the more you borrow. And obviously the fiat system sort of makes that easier because it devalues your future, but it's just sort of backwards thinking. Like by saving, you are producing more than you consume, right? You're being more productive. You're taking less and giving more. Like it's a good way of running the world where people have incentive to give more and take less because we're going to create things that we want and need. Um, and then you can spend when you're ready, when it's worthwhile, not because you have to, because you're sitting on a melting ice cube of savings, right? So yeah, very much it changes a lot. Like it changes a lot about you, a lot of the way of thinking it. And the saving element is hugely important. Like that's part of capital formation. Saving is a really, really important component of a sound economy. And we have no concept of that anymore.
It's shocking. What so I mean, I'm sure you're fighting the good fight every day, right? You're orange pilling people. Uh,
I'm
how is
trying.
that right? How is that going? And what is it like? Are you like are you in the process now where you're just like thirsty to learn more? Are there areas of Bitcoin that you aren't as familiar with that you want to dive into? Like, what's the landscape look like for you now going forward?
Yeah, I feel like I'm sort of tugged in a couple of different directions because the Bitcoin side of me that like makes me want to contribute to a better world is right now my focus, and especially being in Toronto, being in literally, I never thought this would be the case, that we're the most locked down place in like the hemisphere, um, the most restricted place in the Americas. I'm more focused on, human rights, the Canadian Charter of Rights, rule of law, like that side of things. The honest money thing is still supremely important and very important for the future. Um, I would say that, yeah, I'm definitely making headway. Like COVID expedited people's understanding of what is happening out there, or at least forced them to reconsider what they thought they knew about how the world worked. Um, which is obviously a double-edged sword because for obvious reasons, I don't need to go into it.
Sure.
And so that part, the part of it where people are really reconsidering, various elements of life is a good thing, although we have to deal with some really bad, side effects of that. It has allowed me for sure to have more conversations. People are more open to the ideas that I talk about, and it resonates. So like that part's good. It's often not coming from the places I thought it would come from because whether it's certain people are just entrenched in their thinking or, some of my best friends just, I've been working on them for years and I couldn't get them to buy Bitcoin. Meanwhile, an old friend who I maybe haven't seen or spoken to a couple of years, or I only talk to them once in a while, he'll go, oh yeah, I read your book, or I heard you talk about this and that really made sense. Like, can we chat? And we'll have a conversation and it won't be long. I could spend 20 minutes with them and they're like, okay, like, yeah, I need to do this. This makes sense. And with Bitcoin, again, with everything, because it's all in layers, it's not about going 0 to 100 and saying, okay, I have all my money in stocks and bonds and real estate. Now I need to take it all out and put it all into Bitcoin. Like that's not even advisable, really. It's get your toe, dip your toe in, see what it's like to one of the things I really like to suggest to people is if you've never bought Bitcoin or used Bitcoin, buy $5 or $10 worth, send it from one wall to another, like feel that experience of a transaction going through, because that really helps to reinforce what Bitcoin is, how it works. So, you do that and you can sort of feel the network. Um, it made a huge difference for me for sure when I was getting started. I can't actually say how many people that's worked for. But the message is resonating for sure right now.
It's these are like very exciting times for sure, and I just I just feel, extremely blessed that, I mean, you talk about the history of gold and whatever, wherever we land in that, thousands of years, and Bitcoin happens to be, you know, uh, coming into its own during our lifetime. I mean, it's crazy to think about, really.
Oh yeah. And you mentioned gold. Like I said, I started out sort of as a gold bug because at the time for me, like that was the best money. Bitcoin wasn't really available. I heard about Bitcoin, a year or two after it came out, and I but I didn't buy it. I wouldn't have known how. The infrastructure wasn't there. I wouldn't have known what to do with it, even if I figured out how to buy it. But I've in the last couple years and very strongly in this year realized like gold is dead. Gold is completely and totally dead as a monetary option for the world. Um, it'll never, be used again. We're never going to use it for commerce. Like the notion that we're somehow going to start exchanging gold again is pretty laughable, especially since most of it is concentrated in gold vaults, like whether it's central banks or other commercial banks gold vaults. And the only way to use it in a digital transaction would be to get some ticket for it, but that's someone else's promise that they actually have the gold, and that defeats the whole point of don't trust, verify. Like if I don't have the physical gold, then I can't possibly know that it's mine or not, and it's difficult to confirm that it's actually real gold versus gold plated tungsten or something like that. So yeah, that was like that really hit home for me this year. I never thought I would sell my gold, but I sold my gold this year. I was holding on to it as like a little bit of a hedge.
Yeah.
And then it was just, I realized there's no point. Like I was sort of grasping at straws and thinking to myself that like, well, just in case, whatever. I had it for over 10 years. Like there was a bit of an emotional attachment to it, but to get rid of it was a bit of a weight off my shoulders for sure. Cause it just like, yeah, the whole process of selling it was crazy. Um, I don't ever want to go through that again. Um, yeah, it's done. Anyway, sorry, I may have brought up gold more than you did, but
No,
I think
I
it's kind
mean,
of,
that's bang on, because, as Michael Saylor would say, the supply expands, every year by two and a
oh,
half percent, right? So we don't even know how much gold there is in the world, and the supply continues to expand. So it's an energy leak in that sense, right? And if you want to touch on some of the others, like getting taxed in real estate, or having the need for third party security measures for any other assets, when you kind of look at the whole landscape of store of value assets that are out there, I mean, you really are faced with either third party, counterparty risk, or some form of inflation that just does
yeah.
not, as Sailor would say, vacuum seal your asset long term.
Yeah, Bitcoin blows all of them out of the water. It's not even close. It's not even close. I see there's a couple questions popping up there, so I can just take a minute maybe to try to answer them. I don't know if this is the normal course
Yeah,
of things. I just
absolutely. No, there's no format here. People have questions, fire off, and we'll try and get to all of them here. So
yeah. So I saw sorry, I think Donna. Okay, so what are the Chinese doing with all the gold they have? I have no idea. I just know that I have no need for gold and that I don't think it's going to be very useful. So whatever they're doing with it, couldn't tell you. Um, and just Marilena writes about my website or Canadian rights. So I mean, my website is magicbitcoinbook.com. I'm terrible with it. It's really just a website that links to my Amazon, for my book. I should I tried at one point to link my blog to it, but again, tech is just really not my thing. So if you want to follow my blog, though, I do write on Medium. I've written a couple things on Medium, and the one about the Canadian rights, it was actually about the Adamson barbecue situation, which is about a lot more than just a guy wanting to keep his restaurant open. And I'll leave it at that. But if you either go to my Twitter, it's a pinned tweet, or I'm sure if you Google Jesse Berger, risk it for the brisket, you'll find it. But it's, or Jesse Berger medium, risk it for the brisket, you'll find it.
How about a quick
Oh,
word, Jesse, on, yeah, there's a couple questions that are going to file through and some one's talking about another crypto. Any, just chime in on, I mean, I get hit daily with, hey, what about this coin or what about that coin or whatever. Just quick something or other on altcoins, if you wouldn't mind.
yeah. Well, the purpose, actually, you know what? Hold on. I'm going to pull up. I made some notes on that topic specifically for something I did recently. So just give me 1 second and I'll
Sure.
pull it up. And while I'm pulling it up, I'll try to think about it. I think I saw, sorry, there was another question there on, apparently is this China trying to build a cryptocurrency backed by gold? Like, how are you going to verify that they have the gold? They can tell you it's the same thing as like a gold ETF. Like, maybe it's easier to transfer than a gold ETF, but the principle of you are trusting some third party, some other entity to verify that the gold is there, and you should not be trusting anyone. You should verify for yourself. So that's what I'll say about that. Okay. In terms of what separates Bitcoin from some of the others that are out there, number one is a little bit more of a fun one, but like the immaculate inception, right? Bitcoin had no precedent when it began. It was the first real cryptocurrency that actually worked in the wild. The cypherpunks, whether it was Nick Szabo or Adam Back or Wayday or a bunch of the others, had tried sort of various implementations and they never really worked. But Bitcoin was the first to actually hit off, and it just was this like ingenious combination of existing technologies that didn't necessarily bring anything so new to the table. Maybe the difficulty adjustment was the one key thing that it brought in, but it had this immaculate inception where no precedent, and as a result of the founder being anonymous and the founder never moving or cashing out his coins, which I think is a really, really important and not too often talked about part of Bitcoin, is that it gives Bitcoin this sort of halo effect where it's like it's imbued with this altruism, because Bitcoin is en route to becoming, I mean, it's $1 trillion asset right now. And if it becomes, let's call it as valuable as gold, where gold's market cap is 8 trillion or so, Satoshi would effectively be, well, I don't know what math would make Satoshi the wealthiest person in the world. But if Bitcoin does what we expect it to do, Satoshi could theoretically become the wealthiest person in the world to never cash out or benefit whatsoever from its founding. There's no CEO, there's no marketing team, there's no employees, there's not even really like clearly defined governance. Bitcoin is just this like organic digital entity that exists in the wild, and every other coin, just about every other coin, suffers from this team that is latched on some way somehow, and they have their hand out that they are enriching themselves one way or the other, right? The Ethereum Foundation sold $100 million worth of their tokens in the peak of the Ethereum coins or tokens, whatever, at its peak in 2017 to fund their development. There's always someone like that you could go after and attack. You could try to character assassin Vitalik or whatever it is, or criticize them for one thing or another, but there's no one to go after for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is, right? Like it just, it's very existential. It just is. There's nothing else to it. Whereas all these other things, there is still some smaller degree of trust to it. And so that's an important part of Bitcoin, right? That differentiates it, that it was specifically designed to solve the issue of trust. We already really talked about don't trust, verify, but Bitcoin and its proponents and those who contribute to it and work on it are very adamant of, we need to do everything we possibly can to keep it as trust minimized as possible, or to make it even more trust minimized. There is no scenario where we should make it such that it is, more centrally, you have to trust a more central entity. That any proposal that, suggests that basically gets blocked out, because that is antithetical to the point of Bitcoin. Whereas again, all these other coins, there's going to be a lot of trust involved. and the amount of trust varies for sure. But it's still there, and it's still there way more in Bitcoin. And then finally, one thing that I like to talk about is the scarcity. And when I say scarcity, I'm not necessarily talking about the 21 million Bitcoins, but it's more so that it's a scarce system. Bitcoin's consensus algorithm, or proof of work, right, which is the mining mechanism, in my mind, the way that I explain it in my book and the way that I've come to think about it, it literally exists to prove the singularity of its ledger. And so in that sense, it is existential because it functions, it exists to prove its own existence. You cannot replace or supersede that, because as soon as you try to replace or supersede it, you admit that there could be more, iterations. You could replace it again and again and again, and then what's the point? So that, to me, that it is like this one of a kind thing, you can't invent that again, is very powerful. And then I guess the last part, I mean, there's probably a few other parts, but I'll end this part on the incentives. Like Bitcoin's incentives work beautifully. It works seamlessly. Everyone, we just talked about how, I am personally changed by Bitcoin, and many people are personally changed by Bitcoin. It's not just the wealth factor that, oh yeah, like I don't like to say that I got richer by owning Bitcoin in the sense that like my net worth in dollars is higher than it was a few years ago. It's that my purchasing power increased. And that is part of the virtuous cycle, this positive incentive feedback loop, along with the savings, the don't trust, the don't trust verify, it all works together very, very well. With all these other tokens, you should really carefully evaluate the incentive mechanism. Because again, if there's some team with their handout attached to it, or they're still tinkering and figuring it out, like, oh, it's not decentralized yet, we're going to make it decentralized later. It's like, how are you doing that? How are you going to tinker with these incentives and make it just right? Like, you're clearly benefiting from its existence. So there's lots of things that really differentiate Bitcoin from a lot of other coins out there. And you really have to have, in my mind, a very good understanding, or at least try to have a good understanding of Bitcoin's framework of what makes it so special, so that you can use that framework to apply it to other coins and say, is this going to best Bitcoin? Because all these coins, they all want to be valuable. That's the goal. They all are trying to funnel not just value, but trust. And so Bitcoin is the most trustworthy because it's the most trust minimized. You don't have to trust it. And therefore, because I verify, I trust it. It's, it sounds a little weird to say, but like, that's what it is. I don't have to trust it. I verify it. Therefore, I can trust it. Can't say the same about a lot of these other things. Can you run your own node with Ethereum? I once, in 2017, I actually ran my own Ethereum node on my laptop. I basically blew up my laptop. I couldn't run it. And it was, and now their thing's a hot mess. They're changing the engine while the plane is flying. They're changing the whole consensus mechanism. So it's like, how do you know it's going to work? You're gambling on this thing. And what does it do? What is the goal? Who's attached to it? There's so many questions. Whereas Bitcoin is just very simple, very profound. It works. Yeah.
It's boring. It's boring compared to the
right? Boring. There's nothing wrong with boring.
Right?
And like, boring is good. Simple, profound.
Hey, the when it's not the shiny object syndrome, right? That people are like, wow, this one's only 10 cents. It only has to go to 20 cents, and I can double my money, right? That unit bias is very strong.
Unit bias. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, people see the sticker price of 10 cents can go to 20 cents. That seems like an easier leap than 60,000 to 120,000, right? But the problem with all that is most people are measuring in dollars, not Bitcoin, which is the problem.
Bingo.
And then B, if it goes from 10 cents to 20 cents, well, are you going to get out? And what is your end goal? What is the thing you are trying to accumulate at the end of the day? Like, I've already said, like, I'm X out of 21 million. My wealth is measured as X divided by 21 million. It's a really simple formula. It's the only math I really need to do in this world anymore. When you're dealing with altcoins, okay, you go from 10 cents to 20 cents, you turn $100 into $200. And then what? Then you have fiat, and fiat's depreciating. What are you going to do with that?
Right.
So you're constantly on the hamster wheel. Bitcoin is the thing that lets you get off the hamster wheel.
And when everything is priced in Bitcoin, they're actually dropping in value, right? Prices are
Yeah. So
dropping.
yeah, so we've seen a few fun like little websites and things pop up over the last couple of months where guys are like, you could have bought, the original AirPods in 2016 and paid $300. Oh, but that Bitcoin is now worth, $2,100, or, so they're just showing, and I don't know if that's the right year for AirPods or whatever, but
Yeah.
I think you get the point.
Yeah. That's funny. So, if you had some advice for, we've got a lot of people that have, I would say the majority of the people that are on this call have some experience with Bitcoin. They've used it. They might even be earning it on a side project or two, and are familiar with the nuts and bolts of it. Some people are just coming into the space where it's like, it sounds appealing. They can grok it on some level, which is like, hey, I want something that's not, in being inflated by the government. So some people can start to grasp those sort of general overarching concepts. What would you say for, by and large, new people? What would your advice be, like, at this point in the game?
Buying or investing in Bitcoin, saving in Bitcoin, really, I should say saving in Bitcoin.
Just getting as much, just accumulating
Um,
as much as you can.
It's oh no, sorry, I was just starting the
Oh,
sentence
yeah.
there. I was no, I
All
was gonna
in.
say saving in Bitcoin is sort of like investing in yourself, right? That's what it is. Yeah. In terms of getting up and running, I mean, we already talked about, that first transaction, like experiencing the network. That experience is the best teacher, right? So experience Bitcoin, and it goes in layers. It goes from sending it to your, what's Coin Square, or whatever, ShakePay or whatever account,
Yep.
to your, you know, Blue Wallet if it's on your, your phone maybe, and then you're gonna go to the next layer. Well, okay, I'm gonna get a cold card, and I'm gonna run a node, and so you're gonna go down these layers, um, experience it, dive into it, be willing to make a couple mistakes, teach yourself, like learn to learn, is something that's really important just in life in general, right? Again, and that's part of being, a critical thinker and being willing to evaluate things on your own. So yeah, I wish I had a good, one liner for you, but
Yeah, no. I mean, that's it, it's a nice summation of some of the points that we've already talked about. Because some people are just kind of like, I think they're stuck between, do I is it worth it for me to do more homework on it? Like, I understand it to a certain degree where I've already got some, but the opportunity cost so great? Like, what is it that's going to get people to wrap their head around the opportunity cost of diving in further? I guess what's going to make people, what's going to assist in orange pilling? I guess it's, it's just
it's
as much me asking advice to you on, like,
yeah.
how would I help guide more people to, to get orange pill? And for those, someone asked the question earlier, what does orange pill mean? It just means you've gone down the rabbit hole. Bitcoin is the color is orange. And so being orange pill is like, I've got it. I'm all in. It's like, now you're in the
Well, it's
matrix, right?
it's
So,
yeah, it's a reference to the Matrix, right? When Morpheus goes, you can take the blue pill and go back to La La Land, or you can take
right.
the red pill and I'll show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. So we basically took the red pill and we coated it orange because Bitcoin's orange. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot to Bitcoin, and so one of the things I'll say is, like, don't trust me. Don't take anything I say, like, don't think anything that I say is true. Like, figure it out for yourself. Go, and to do that, part of it is experience, which we talked about. Part of it is there's lots of other Bitcoiners out there doing podcasts, writing articles, writing books. Like, yes, I love my book. I recommend it. I crushed myself to deliver this book, but I love so many other Bitcoin books that are out there and would recommend a whole bunch of them too. Um, so learn from so many. Yeah, don't trust Jesse. Exactly. Um, yeah, like learn from all sorts of other people, figure out all these other perspectives that are out there, and then let that help to inform your own perspective using, what you know and how you feel and your expertise, and putting all the pieces together yourself.
Bitcoin Twitter is just, it's a mind blow for me, because I feel like, I can go through, my whole Twitter feed is all hardcore Bitcoiners. And I feel like I can go, spend an hour on there and I can learn more than I did in a whole semester at school. You know what I mean?
Twitter,
Like
Twitter's a gold mine.
it is unbelievable, and it's for free, and people don't even they're not even there. Even if they're selling something, they don't even, it's not about the money. It's like people have been asking, hey, put this into a, a form that we can purchase or whatever. Right. So I'm floored by, like I said at the top of the hour, the generosity of the community and how people are willing to go out of their way and help. It's just, it really is an amazing community. I'll date myself and say it's like that Blind Melon video with the girl in the bumblebee suit walking around town, doesn't know who's what, and then finally finds their group of bumblebees at the end. So anyone who's of age will know what that video is all about. But you got to be a grunge person from the 90s to get that reference. What, you're probably too young for that. So a couple more questions, Jesse, and then we'll let you go. I
Yeah.
know you're busy, but if you touched on stuff that's going on in Canada earlier, we're seeing chaos ensue in a number of other countries. And to some of your points, certain banks are only letting people withdraw a certain amount of money. I mean, this is real. It's happening around the world. There's $100 trillion bills in some countries. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is actually happening. And so if things were to go a little bit sideways in Canada to a level that would have you thinking about, hey, maybe it's not the place, or do you have a backup plan? And where would you go? What would you do?
Yeah, very timely question. There is a part of me that very much wants to just bug out of here and go to, Florida and Texas are obviously sort of like the easy choices as Canadians. Um, Portugal, Uruguay, our other Panama. Although I dislike the idea of going to an island. I think going to an island is you're lacking for resources on an island. Um, I have a buddy, Jordan Bush, J.M. Bush, who co-wrote "Thank God for Bitcoin," who is a missionary who lives in Uruguay, who's just like a phenomenal human being so far as I can tell. And, we've had a number of exchanges. And so he's been living in Uruguay with his family for a while. He's like, yeah, you can if you buy a property there, and there's a threshold, I think it's like 375,000 US. So it's not like anyone can just go in, but, if you own a condo in Toronto and you sold it and you went down there, if you buy a property for $375,000 in Uruguay, you get you get residency right then and there, and no income tax for 10 years. It's a place with sort of rolling lush green hills, beaches, lots of cattle, lots of space. It's like, people call it the Switzerland of Uruguay. That's a very generous, the Switzerland of Latin America. I think that's a very generous term. It's just small and out of the way, and they have a small government, and they don't really bother their people. And that's, it's still developing to a certain degree, but it just seems like a nice out of the way place. But I have very deep roots here. My whole family's here. It's like, for me to bug out, I don't think it's going to happen, even though in my head, part of me is like, I need to get out of here, or I fear at least for what's going to happen here. I mean, thankfully there's a lot of caring people who care about freedom here, care about our rights, seem to be willing to stand up and fight for it. And like, that gives me a lot of hope. So yeah, there's options out there for people that are looking to get away. I just use Uruguay as an example because I know Bush who's down there.
Sure.
But there's other places to look and go. But I sure hope that we don't have to. Like, I really,
Me too. Me
I
too.
just, if anything, it's more, I'm now more incentivized to at least get out of the city. I'm not, stuck in City Place in one of those giant packed towers. Like, that just seems like a disaster waiting to happen, especially if the culture is, it seems very unlikely to me that the culture that we had will ever come back. Like, even if we snapped our fingers tomorrow and removed all restrictions, we've scared so many people and misled so many people. And that's not good for our social fabric. And it's, to rebuild that, it's not a light switch. You don't just flick a switch and we get back to it. So a lot of damage has been done. City life has lost a ton of appeal. So I think moving, doesn't matter how far north of the city, if I don't know if everyone's in and around Toronto here, but, just somewhere where there's some more space, you can get to know the people who provide your food, whether the farmers, your butcher, where the cattle's raised, all that stuff. If you can sort of build up a little bit more resiliency where you're not dependent like we are in the city on just imports coming in, right? Like, and it doesn't matter if it's coming in from out of country or just, from north of the city, but you're dependent to a certain degree. And if you can reduce that dependence by going places where there's a little bit, it may be a smaller community, but it can be a more tight-knit community, I think that can be really beneficial. And that's something that's on my radar. And I don't know how I'm going to do that given some family and relationship stuff, but it's something that's very much on my mind.
I hear you, and those are great points, and it's something that we're strongly considering too, and it's always kind of been about community as well. So we want to be around the like-minded people also. So
for sure. And Joe Nillo just said going to Costa Rica, so $150K gets you property and permanent residence. Costa Rica, I hear wonderful things about. I think they're basically open as well. Like, there's no real restrictions there. I was there once, and it's a beautiful country. Like, that would be a great place too.
Yeah.
They don't believe in Bitcoin, no tax. Yeah. Always a benefit.
Right. So what's Jesse, what's next for you?
Yeah. What is next? That's a good question. I told you that the writing, I can't do like a sequel to the book, and I'm not going to write another book the way I did this book, but I'll just say I have an idea that I think would be pretty straightforward, and like I could pull it off. I just haven't been able to focus on it yet. So I don't want to say what it is because I haven't even done it. But I have a little idea that would be fun, and I would enjoy if I could just feel like at peace, which I'm lacking for these days. Other than that, I got I've been working with Guy Swan on my audiobook, and I've been dragging my feet again because I'm just not in a good headspace totally these days. But like I gotta, he's already recorded it. We're trying to add these, like, because my book, the way it is, we already talked about it. I'm trying to add like sound effects and interesting things just to change it up from a standard audiobook and give it a little extra oomph and character. And so I the ball's in my court right now. I got to go through the latest edition of it. So I'll get on that. And yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know. I don't know what's next for me. I love the freedom of just, I'll work on projects that come up that I'm interested in. It feels great to like work on something that, the book, I maybe have just recouped the costs that I put into the book. Forget the hours. I don't know if I'll ever recoup the hours if those are billable hours. But the actual dollar costs I put into the book, I finally just recouped those.
Awesome.
But it's like, I'm so happy I did it because it was so rewarding to do it, to go through the experience of writing it. Because it was a learning experience to write the book for sure. So whatever I do, it's whatever is going to make me fulfilled and happy and feel good. It's not going to be like, I've probably burned all the bridges in the corporate world anyway with the stuff I write these days and talk about. But I wouldn't want to, give my soul over to them anyway. I did it. I vividly remember at certain points in my career feeling like my soul was being sucked away from me. And like, I don't ever want that feeling again. So whatever I do, I'll try to make a positive contribution to Bitcoin, to humanity. And that's what it'll be. What form that'll take, I don't know, but it'll be for everyone's betterment.
Love it. I think that's probably a great spot to wrap it up. So Jesse, I really want to thank you for your time. Some people have already put some nice messages. I'm getting them as well. Thank everyone for hopping on the call tonight. Jesse, that was amazing. Really enjoyed that. Time just flew by. I don't even know how long we've been on for, but that was great. That was awesome. And we'll have to get a beer sometime, or if you play golf, you're welcome to come on. We're actually going to get out with Greg Foss at some point. So
Oh
I
yeah,
know he's a buddy of yours.
Greg's my biggest cheerleader. I love Greg. Are you
He's a
kidding?
great, he's a good dude. So we'll have to sort of tie in a little bit more of this Bitcoin crowd around the GTA. So we'll definitely we'll have to get together, and I'd love to have you back on at some point. As this, I don't know where this this thing that I'm doing is going either, but it's it's a labor of love for me too, and just paying it forward, and helping teach other people what I feel like is the best way to learn as well, in a way.
Yeah,
So
no, thank you to everyone. And I mean, thank you, Mike, for the host and for asking great questions. Like, honestly, like awesome questions. And to everyone, I'm reading the comments now. Like, thank you very much for listening. I don't, consider myself an expert or like someone that everyone should listen to, but like, I'm glad you all enjoyed it. So thank you for listening to me and hanging out with me tonight. It's appreciated for sure. It feels good coming this way. So thank you for that.
You're a star in the community. Can't thank you enough. And I'm going to browbeat every single person that's on this call until they get this book. It's on Amazon. Just do a quick search for it.
I'll give you, so on the cover, there's like, I probably lost count. There's probably about a dozen Easter eggs on the cover. I don't know if you can point out one or two of them, like the dollar bill here. I'll hold it up to my camera.
Yeah.
I'm gonna lose it. So there's a dollar bill right there. I got the year 1971 marked on the dollar bill for the year we cut the tie to the gold standard.
So cool.
There's obviously in the satellite, I have the Times 03, Jan 2009 Chancellor on the brink of bailouts. I put a whole bunch of fun little Easter eggs. Both, like, the cover is the main one. I crushed myself for this cover.
It's
this
so
thing had to be
cool.
perfect.
It's so cool.
But they're sprinkled throughout the book too. There's lots of little Easter eggs in the book too. So that was me getting to have a little fun with it as well as anyway. So I'm just obviously very proud of the book, but yeah, this was a lot of fun, Mike. Thank you so much. Well, I really appreciate it.
Hey, as a fellow Canadian, we're proud of you, and I'd love to get together with you at some point as well. I'll take you out for a beer when the patios open up. As soon as it warms up, we'll go for a drink. But yeah, thanks again, guys. Thank you guys for hopping on. I hope you guys got something out of that call, and I know you did. And I'm gonna check. I'm gonna make sure everyone's holding up a copy of the book next time we're all on video. So thank you guys for coming on. Jesse, thank you again. And have a great week, everyone. And we'll see you next week, same time.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.